are these people?
Honestly, this gives me no pleasure to talk about this at all. I didn't want to talk about this at all, but I think there was some information. I will admit, I came in with a bias because I was just kind of like, this is just another one of these major performative rallies / protests that we saw in the first wave of Trump back in 2017 and following.
And if it walks like a duck.
Right. So I had no interest. I didn't care about it. But there was, but after, since the weekend, and just seeing some things and talking to some people that we know regarding this, not to say I've changed my view on it. I still feel a way about it, and I'll get into that later. But I think there's definitely a little more, some more implications to this that I'm sure other commentators have reported on, but I'm going to say kind of my take on a lot of it. So yeah, over the weekend, we had the hands-off marches / rallies / protests that apparently, Reef, were in pretty much every major city in the country, including overseas. Sounds something?
Yep.
Actually, to me, that sounds like a couple of things that have occurred within the last 5 years.
Yep.
But let's see what mainstream media. Now, key point: mainstream media reported on this.
Oh, of course they did.
So
only particular parts of it, I'm sure. You know,
right? Sky News, which is Australian based, reported on this. So let's see what mainstream media had to say about these protests over the weekend.
Cool. Un momento. Here.
In the shadow of the Washington Monument, a symbol of America's democracy, they gathered in protest against the president.
Stand tall in every state. Stand tall in truth. Stand tall.
His trade war was the final straw for these people. They say he's targeting working Americans, migrants, and community groups.
We've seen that guy
I find
before.
What is happening in our government so appalling.
You recognize that guy?
His trade war was the final straw for these people. They say he's targeting working Americans, migrants, and community groups.
Yeah.
I find
he's
what is
part
happening.
What is that? The Poor People's
Campaign.
Yeah.
In our government so appalling and so immoral. I mean, that's really why I feel like I need to be here.
I finally reached a breaking point. I couldn't take it anymore. Actually, I probably win the long distance award. I came here from Hawaii.
Look at our country. It's
Hawaii?
embarrassing. Like,
How
genuinely
the fuck
embarrassing to be like an American right now.
There wasn't protests in
There were
Hawaii
protests
you could
in
go
1,000
to?
cities across all 50 states.
Right.
We shall overcome.
A nationwide act of defiance that can't have gone unnoticed. But Donald Trump appeared focused on other things, reading headlines about China's tariffs on his way to the golf course.
These people are pushing back against what they describe as the most brazen power grab in history. But President Trump's press secretary says anyone who thinks he's going to be deterred by protests like these is living under a rock.
Opposition is growing, though, many still refusing to be silenced.
We have to speak out, we have to act, we have to do something, because this is not America.
What do you say to people who would argue that the
Baby,
people have already spoken in that President Trump won the election?
Some people have spoken, and then some people have not. And those of us that have not, we need to speak now.
But will the president listen? He's pressing on with his agenda, regardless of the number, joining the march against him.
Our
David
body's
Blevins,
our choice.
Sky News.
She must be for bodily autonomy. You know?
Well, there's a reason why I said, baby, you're not supposed to be there. I'll get into why later.
Well, like, it's also just all this focus on figureheads. Trump, Elon, all that shit. Nothing of actual substance. I say that. I'm sure some, I assume, are bringing things of substance, which I did see, but, you know, gets lost in the sauce, don't it?
Right. We've only covered stuff from Vogue once.
Okay.
I believe. At least once.
Yeah.
On this show in the 3 years that we've been on. So that should tell you something. The fact that a fashion magazine is even reporting on this. That's why I pulled it. Like, I could have pulled it from anywhere, But the fact that Vogue reported on this, that should be sent off red flags to everybody in the chat. Because why would a fashion magazine report on protests?
Do you ever look at someone and wonder what is going on inside their head?
Like,
right. So just to kind of give you a clue, I mean, you guys are smart. So, but that being said, Anna Capola reported in Vogue, hands off, millions of anti-Trump protesters take to U.S. streets. Across the streets in all 50 states on Saturday, April 5th, protesters called for an end to President Donald Trump's hostile takeover and his authoritative overreach and billionaire-backed agenda under the banner of the Hands Off movement. More than 150 progressive groups were involved in organizing the 1,400-odd demonstrations. They included progressive public policy advocate groups like Move On and Indivisible, and others that work across civil rights, women's rights, veteran support, labor, climate change, and LGBTQ plus advocacy.
There it goes.
Per a public statement, demands from Hands Off include an end to the billionaire takeover and rampant corruption of the Trump administration, an end to slashing federal funds for Medicaid, Social Security, and other programs working people rely on, and an end to an attack on immigrants, trans people, and other communities.
Yeah.
Protests also focused on Musk's illegal power grab, with a group stating that Trump, Musk, and congressional Republicans are gutting services, raising prices, and racing towards slashing Medicaid, Social Security, and more. In New York, thousands marched from Bryant Park to Madison Square Park. In Washington, D.C., tens of thousands of protesters gathered at the National Mall, and large crowds in Hollywood, Florida, close to Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort, turned out for the demonstration. One protest took place at a Tesla dealership in Fort Lauderdale. There were also international solidarity protests taking place in Paris and London, among other European cities. At the group's largest protest in D.C., Democratic representatives took turns to speak to the crowd, including Maryland's Jamie Raskin, who described the president as having the politics of Mussolini and the economics of Herbert Hoover. Minnesota Democratic Representative Ilhan Omar and Maxwell Frost, that punk, of Florida also spoke, asking people to take part in the action, donate to mutual aid funds, put pressure on their elected representatives, I hope that includes them, and stay focused on the demands. Across the demonstrations, chants of "Hey ho, Trump's gotta go" and "Power to the people" circulated. Placards read "Hands off education," "F Musk," and "Resist, resist." So this was the pomp and circumstance that happened over the weekend, and I felt a way. And I showed this on Twitter.
No point in saying
Case
good
in
morning.
point. I'm sorry, but I protested for Medicare for All back in 2021. There were protests in over 50 cities, and none of them got any national coverage. At best, local, but not national. Now, because Cheetah Man is in office, everyone and their mother wants to protest now, and these protests get national coverage. This is why I don't take these protests seriously anymore. I understand the desire to protest Trump, but people are acting like Biden was perfect during his administration, that he wasn't worth protesting against, Gaza and student loan debt aside. This is the kind of energy that should be happening constantly, regardless of who is president. But I guess it is easier and more obvious when a Republican is in power. So those were my thoughts that I shared over the weekend. And apparently this tweet, for me, did very well. And a lot of you all agreed with me. So Indy, shout out to you, tweeted back, responded, "La pussy hat wearing brunch libs decided it was 8 years since their last parade yelling about Trump that accomplished nothing. Why not do it again?" Moonlight Butter doesn't, I'm not sure who this is in the kind of tweet. But they said, I got the same people who used to say we were overreacting when we said we were on the brink of World War III under Biden. Now they want to yell at MFers for not joining their feel-good parades. The same parades that will disappear once again
That's
when
my
Trump
problem.
is gone.
Who are these people?
Oh, Kate.
I would love to hear any of
Um,
Bella Ciao for a sound drop. I like the first 7-11 seconds of this mix from Bandcamp. I'll take a look. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Kate.
Yep.
So
Ooh.
at the _Z said, modern protests are performative. It's a way for the participants to feel like they're involved in a self-congratulatory way. No protest movement has been successful in my lifetime. To that end, name a modern protest movement that enunciates clear demands. It's theater. Now, to be fair, there were demands, but what will happen if those demands were not met? That I didn't necessarily. You can tell me in the chat if you heard anything of the like, because again, I was tuned out of this whole thing. But my guess is it was just like, we have to stop Trump. We need to defend insert issue or cultural issue here.
Right.
And that was more or less what I guess was probably what was spoken a lot of over the weekend.
Yeah.
I got a few more.
Okay.
A couple more. Actually, wait. Did I? Yeah. So again, I got tuned out of it. This was kind of what I was seeing also initially online. Black Americans did not attend the April 5th protests around the country, at least not the 80% men or 92% women who did what was necessary November 5th, 2024. That was election day. So this was an implication of people needed to vote for Kamala Harris. Thanks to all who stood up in America, assignment understood. So I was seeing quite a few of these.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like, okay, I don't care, more so.
Sure.
Because it shouldn't, didn't care about Kamala. We all know that. But as we got into later in the weekend, there actually, I think a lot of these were bots, and a lot of these were more of the influencers who are trying to use the Kamala tactic, and probably K-Hive as well, to kind of justify Black people not being at these events. But shout out to DJ Joe Nice. When I spoke, actually, wait. I might mix these up a little bit, but that's okay. I think I've mixed some slides around. But I'll get back to this in a second. I'll come back to that. But Randall Calrissian the second said,
yes,
when Nancy Pelosi shows up to your protest, you know it's fake.
Yeah.
Case in point. Power to the People tweeted, when a corrupt corporate politician like Nancy Pelosi shows up to your rallies, it means you are not resisting anything except the reality that both parties serve the oligarchy and the new system is needed. Spartacus himself,
Who are these people?
Cory Booker, attended a rally, I guess, in Montclair, New Jersey, close to my hometown.
Yeah.
Town north from where I used to live. Senator Cory Booker joins a hands-off protest in Montclair, New Jersey with a message for us all. We achieved every great thing in this country because every citizen stood up and said enough is enough. It's time to turn our anger into action, our worry into work. It's time to turn our fear into light.
Bro, homie, you're the one that's supposed to be doing the work, not the rest of them.
Right.
They're here to tell you to do the fucking work, and you aren't, and you haven't, and you should be fucking ousted.
Belcrum Gill tweeted, on the historical significance of Cory Booker's speech, he stood for 25 hours. That was the huge thing that people were talking about last week. He then voted against a resolution that would harm arms sales to Israel. He voted to continue sending Israel arms that were slaughtering Palestinian children. Booker stands for genocide, nothing more. So, yeah. So
you got no friends in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. So this was kind of bullshit. So let me go back because I messed up the slides. So I want to go back to this tweet. As I said, so I was seeing a lot of this over the weekend. So I said had nothing to do with it. I saw this tweet in regards to Kamala of basically being like Black people didn't need to be at this event because we allegedly, because we did the work of voting for Kamala and we still got Trump, so we should have nothing to do with it. So that's what I was seeing a lot of, at least from the bots and the K Hive and the black influencers online. But then talking to GJ Joe Nice, I saw he kind of, and I'll get to his tweet a little later. He kind of told me another angle that I wasn't seeing at the time. But then, so I did a little digging, and this is what I pulled up. This is from TikTok, either TikTok or Instagram, I believe. Yeah, TikTok. So let's see what this Black Queen has to say regarding these protests.
Nubian Queen.
April 5th is coming. And before anybody starts romanticizing protest, let me just say it plain as day. No confusion. We are not going out there. Not this time. We are not going out there. A whole lot of people are planning to hit the streets, right? I know y'all have heard the buzz. Chants, signs, cameras, emotions are going to be high. I get it. Hell, I've been out there before. But the last time we marched, what happened? They tear gassed us, shoved elders to the ground, committed vandalism, and then blamed us. They shot rubber bullets at kids, and then had the nerve to call us violent. We showed up with our voices. They showed up with riot gear. We screamed, "Don't shoot," and they loaded that clip anyway. And let's be clear, this administration, they've let us know in no uncertain terms, Black people in the street equals threat. They're looking for a reason to vilify us. They're waiting for a headline to twist. They're hoping for a camera angle that's going to justify their brutality. And what do we get in return? A quote tweet, a statement, maybe a mural, but no safety, no justice, no peace. So no, we're not marching this time. We're not going to give them the photo op that they so desperately want. We're not playing into that cycle. We're not going to give them the excuse that they're so desperate for. We're protecting our people. We're staying home. We're building offline. We're organizing smarter. Because we don't need to be in the streets to prove that our rage is real. So let them march. Let them bait. Let them spin the same tired narratives. But don't let them turn your Blackness into a threat on live TV. April 5th, we sit back. We step back. We stay safe. Because survival is resistance too.
Okay.
Yeah. So these were kind of some of the things that were kind of popping off from Black people not attending, which, as a person who was at the George Floyd protests and quite a few protests since, I totally get that sentiment in terms of Black people have been at these marches forever, and especially under the last administration, Trump's first, not so much Biden's, but even there, we were kind of vilified in terms of, oh, Black people are there, or not even Black people, like any melanin, any multicultural thing, it was a problem. So that was a lot of what I was kind of seeing bubble up online as well. And just to show that it wasn't Black people who kind of made that connection, or at least saying it, there were some white people who kind of got the idea of what Black people were doing and how significant it was of us not being there. So if you want to pull up this next slide, because this is something that DJ Joe Nice mentioned to me, what he saw in North Carolina, where he's from, that this white lady was able to share on TikTok as well. So go ahead.
See, I didn't know that this was well understood assignment that Black people weren't going to show up to these march to the protest. I didn't know till I got there, and I was like, why is it just white people? Where are all the Black and brown people? Like, I don't get it. Like, why are we fighting for them and they're not here? Hello. I get it now. Because there was no fucking soldiers standing ready. No police on. I'm like, why? Where are all the police? Where are all the, like, because everyone's like, be safe. I'm like, well, fine, whatever. Like, I don't get it. Like, it was all old white people. And those old white people were all safe because the black people weren't there. Because the black people are the reason they show up, the police and the martial law people try to come in the first place. It's their racist hatred of black and brown people that makes protesting dangerous. But across every state, there was no danger because there was no police there policing. And why weren't they policing? Because there were no black people. How sick and sad is that of a statement, white people? That you're just safe because they're not there? Because the people that'll create the violence are the ones that are supposed to be protecting the peace? It's really not about that. It's really because they weren't there that you were safe. And that statement is scary because the violence and the attacks and the injustices that are happening in every state are to black and brown people by the people in power. So I get it now. I get it. You shouldn't be there because you're going to be not safe.
Well, I disagree slightly. I think it's less about because you see this with they've sent police forces into white college campuses here recently. They've done that to, like, I mean, Kent State classically had some issues. You know, there's the black and brown population is kept from those, you know, like places of high esteem because of the institutional racism. But, like, I don't know if having black people at your protest in and of itself makes it. It's like what they're worried about is, will it push back against power effectively? And when it does, that's when the police show up, you know?
Right.
Like, even if it's could barely touch power at all, that's when they show up. So,
well, I think it's because, and again, if we want to use George Floyd as an example,
yeah,
like, because
Standing Rock, like,
right, because the difference was it was multicultural,
yeah,
multiracial, generational.
Yeah.
Like, those are the types. Those, like, when you're building against
poor and working class
the establishment, truly,
right,
then that's a problem.
Yeah.
But if it's like a generally, and I don't want to necessarily make the assumption, I'm not saying that all white people are privileged.
Yes.
But collectively, white people have certain privileges that are not necessarily afforded to everybody else. So if you get a group of white people together, and even Indy was kind of telling me this over the weekend, he's like, what did you notice? It was basically all white old people who were attending these protests.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily say all of that, but based on the reports I was seeing, it was definitely not a lot of,
is what I would call that, you know?
Right. It was more or less the white, I wouldn't say elite, but the comfortable people that we've been screaming at to come to these protests. Right. Surface level. So it's the people that can afford to go home. Yeah, it might sting a bit that they may not, they have to pay for insurance, that they might have to pay a little bit more for the products that they need in their homes or the things that they need every single day, but they'll be able to somewhat manage. Those are the people that we were screaming at for the last 4 years to be like, we need your voices because you actually have some influence in terms of your position that collectively you can actually speak up against the injustices that we do see and witness to, but the last 4 years, as people say, they were out to brunch because they were comfortable. And now that they're experiencing a little bit of discomfort,
right,
or more likely that they just don't like the boogeyman basically saying mean stuff,
well,
that's when they now decide, oh, it's time to come out of their hibernation.
The fact that they were comfortable under previous administrations when you weren't, I wasn't, other people weren't, like, you know, it just shows their status. And a guy could travel from Hawaii to DC. How much that cost? You know, which that's in and of itself, you know, they plant people and all sorts of shit with this kind of stuff, you know, and they do that on both sides. So, but you've got this, you brought this.
Right. So this was me, I believe on Sunday after just seeing a lot of this stuff. So it seems that the hands off protests were mostly attended by white people, and surprise, surprise, there were no cops in riot gear, tear gas, and the like. It was mostly peaceful. But best believe that if drops of melanin were added, it would have been a different story. Again, another tweet that did very well. Wait. Oh, that's right. Shout out to DJ No Nice. He actually sent me an Instagram voice message. So I'm glad once we figure out how to pull that into these slides, we'll do, because I think hearing it from him, I think is a lot more powerful than him writing it. But what he wrote here is basically what he told me in that voice message. But he said to me and say to y'all, I drove past the protest in Capitol Hill. It was mostly suburban wine moms driving range dads and 401k boomers wearing Birkenstocks with black socks. Their sign said nothing about Gaza, Congo, Medicare for all, or reparations. None of them were protesting 5 summers ago. And keep in mind, and Joe had to remind me, that the 5th anniversary of George Floyd's essentially execution is next month.
Yeah.
So let's see if there's going to be anything in May. I'm sure there will be, but let's see what people will say in terms of that whole thing and where we are now and the lack of movement we have against protecting Black people, especially from the police.
Yep.
Let's see if any of that will be mentioned, or at least it'll be more in the very superficial way that mainstream media will do their damnedest to kind of make their talking points about. Let's go back in. At we Stopano, I guess.
Pagano? Yeah.
Weston Pagano. Weston Pagano, I guess.
Yep.
If Kamala loses, it's going to be so weird to watch liberals start protesting the same things they're defending now. And then, come on. And then at Push Stems Left, right on cue. So this was their thing. And a lot of people noted, they were like, hands off NATO. We don't like NATO here. They need to be gone as well.
Yeah.
So, so obviously, like, this was just kind of, to me, just kind of superfluous and just kind of.
And it's this Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security that are really crumbs at best these days.
Right.
They won't support anything past that, God forbid, and they use it as voting fucking blackmail every 4 years. And neither party ever goes, like, they never get rid of it either. So.
Right. We talked about this, I think you and I definitely know I did with Indy, like, over the weekend. Like, the sad thing about these protests, it wasn't initially meant to be like this. It was mostly meant to be about Gaza.
Yeah. Well, that's what I had seen.
But then,
Sam Husseini said there's like 2 protests coming and whatnot. So,
right. So, but then the powers that be and all these organizations, these liberal organizations, essentially hijacked it.
Yeah.
To make it be about Trump and Musk and all these other. And again, it's not to say Medicare is not important. It's not to say a lot of the issues that people were fighting for.
The genocide we're complicit in, I feel like it's at least first billing, you know?
Right.
So, which it wasn't.
Or if you're going to talk, or if you're going to talk about Medicare, or you're going to talk about anything of health, why not Medicare for all?
Yeah.
Like, what happened with that? You know? So, as far as I know, that wasn't even mentioned. So, if you're going to talk about anything, did they talk anything about, for Black people, reparations? Did they talk about anything regarding safety from the police? Remember, this is that's kind of why I didn't go, because it would have brought up like a trigger warnings for me. Because being at the George Floyd protest, I heard a lot of people say, a lot of Black people were saying, we had to vote for Biden because he was basically the only one that could solve the police brutality thing. And what did Biden say within the first few days? Or not even, I don't even think he was even sworn in yet. He was basically like, I ain't doing shit for Black people. And I'm paraphrasing. I don't need to do anything. I'm done in terms of, you know, police brutality against Black people. Like, I don't have to do anything. So that was not even before he was sworn in. So I didn't hear any of those kind of talks at all, based on what I saw online. But I didn't want to end with this. This is a new clip that I think you might not have seen, but I changed that at the last minute. So this is actually trying to remember his name. No, the guy,
Michael White.
Michael White, yeah. So he is the leader of the Occupy Wall Street movement.
Okay.
So he did an interview, I believe, back in 2020. So this was post George Floyd, during the pandemic. Obviously, Wall Street, the whole thing was during the Obama era.
Yep.
So he was asked about protests and why essentially they've become performative and why they don't work now in this modern age. So, short clip. But what he says is very interesting. And I think this is kind of something that I wish I could have said a little more eloquently, like in the past. But I think he nails down something that I think is very important regarding protests today. So you don't mind playing the clip.
We use these clips for educational purposes, which is within our rights as fair use. Just in case, you know?
As you've studied history, and I know this is something you love, is just looking at historical movements, trying to understand how you create change. I mean, what are the ways change happens in your estimation now, if it's not taking to the streets?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the core messages that I'm trying to get across is I'm not saying don't protest. I think what I'm trying to say is we need to reconceive what protest is. Protest, if you look at it historically, what it is it's really a behavior that's culturally defined. People have protested differently throughout human history. I mean, during the American Revolution, they tarred and feathered people or pulled down their houses, or during the Civil Rights era, we marched. And I think now we've reached a point where the current repertoire of our tactics, they're broken. And the reason why they're broken, if you kind of look at why they're broken, is because the story underlying why we protest is false. And that basic story has something to do with that it's kind of a mystical, magical thinking. It has something to do with if you can get large numbers of people in the streets, they manifest some sort of greater power over their democracy, which makes perfect sense in a certain way, because if you can get so many people into the streets saying something, of course their leaders should have to listen to them. But it's not true. It's really not true. So we have to think about, well, how do the people manifest a greater power over their governments? And that gets into these questions of sovereignty, it gets into these other issues. And I think that that's really the direction we need to go, is that we can no longer rely on the fact that we are able to get millions of people into the streets. We act as activists as if that's extremely difficult, but recent years have shown us, since Occupy Wall Street, it's actually very easy for us now. We can get women to march, scientists to march, we can get Black Lives Matter to march. We have to kind of go differently, a little bit deeper. I think the path forward is very hard, but I think that it's going to be fundamentally more rewarding.
Sure.
Yeah. I think we've kind of mentioned that in a different way on this show. Like, the way we protest now shouldn't be the same as what our parents and grandparents were doing in the 60s.
Yeah.
Like, it's old. And yeah, it's like back then, it was going to be a lot harder to gather like millions of people at National Mall. Like, think of MLK's I Had a Dream streets. I'm sure that was very difficult back then. But with social media, you can get people in the streets within seconds. So it's not, that in of itself is easy. What is hard is to kind of, and I say this all the time, is to kind of cultivate that anger and discontent into actionable steps that make politicians scared.
Well, Occupy Wall Street,
and that was why I pulled
itself, you know, put themselves in the faces of the money holders, you know, and made their lot, you know, they actually were afraid of these people indefinitely in their area, right? Like essentially a large sit-in, you know, but it was at least like the money holders then went to Senate and Congress and said, hey, you need to do something about this. Mainly pepper spray these people and, you know, but I digress when they continued to be there. But who broke that up? What happened? I remember there was an Obama, I do believe. But like, yeah, this is, we've talked about how monetarily you can protest with divesting and sanctioning and boycotting, you know, but all those things are fairly, you know.
Right. But here's the thing. But you know, like, this is why in a way George Floyd was kind of significant, because I don't remember politicians coming out in the same way that Nancy and Ilhan Omar and like all these other politicians did to kind of speak to the people back then. Now, granted, we were in the middle of a pandemic, so like people were wearing masks and safety and all that kind of stuff. And at that point, people didn't give a fuck. Like, so I understand that, but I wish I took a picture. I saw Kamala Harris in the, like, within the crowds one day to take a photo op just to show that she was there, you know, and left. So didn't address the people, did not talk to anybody. She just took her picture and left. So, but they were scared, you know, scared enough that when the NBA were threatening to strike, they brought Obama in to talk to the NBA players to essentially have them not strike. So that's why I go back to that time and being like, that was an opportunity that we failed, because we had politicians literally at that point by the balls. And we could have demanded anything that we wanted to, but we squandered it because certain people thought if we just voted our way out of it by having Biden instead of Trump, then things would be a lot better. But as you saw, and you know, and as we've seen from Biden, you know, within the last.
What happened? Caber? Caber, don't freeze on us. Don't do that. Why you do that? There you go. You're back.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, so I'll repeat what I was saying. So, you know, we had Biden for the last few years, and people were saying 5 years ago that we needed to vote our way out of the problem, and during protests at that, and nothing amounted to that. And now we have Trump again, and now we're doing this recyclical thing of, okay, we need to protest again, and watch it within the next couple of years. Oh, we have to vote for the Democratic nominee and whatever, and just all this over and over again when we're not realizing. And look, I'm saying this as a person who loves a protest. Anyone who knows me knows I love to fuck shit up. But I think now we have to consider what is the right way to protest, if we should at all, in this environment where politicians don't give a fuck. Politicians will join in, you know? So
it's great publicity.
We need to get them right. We need to get them to a point where, like, they cannot show their face. So I don't have the answers tonight. I don't think you guys have the answers tonight. But I think that's something we need to talk about moving forward. You know, what does protesting / organizing look like in 2025 and beyond that is beyond the I was there thing. Like, I was there to protest against Trump, but then you went home and went back to your normal life. Like, that's not going to do anything. That certainly has not been the thing to do. And I think we need to speak some truth into that to kind of say, and I hate saying it. Actually, no, I don't. That, like, we can't protest in the same way anymore and think that we're going to get the result. Because as Micah said, it's just kind of like a fairy tale in believing that if enough people got out there, look, Gaza should have been a clear indication for a lot of us, like, they ain't doing shit with that either. So that should tell you they don't care. So long of it is we need to do something different. And I would love to be a part of the conversation as to what that could be. But what we're doing and what this was over the past weekend ain't it. Like, thousands of people, like hundreds of cities aside. And I'm saying that even, honestly, for the Medicare for All march that I did a few years ago, even then. But I didn't know any better back then. So I learned, I grow, and I want to do something else.
Well,
any last thoughts before we
I have something else. There is one thing we could try. We haven't tried it in a while.
Guillotine. Yeah, what might seem barbaric is the last resort to me.
Yeah, GUILLOTINE. What? Sorry. I would never recommend such outlandish things. I wouldn't do it. What? You ever wonder why we're demonetized, Care Bear? Do you ever wonder? Couldn't have been anything like that.
Because we talk, hopefully, I mind real shit. So, and yeah. So, but again, let us know in the comments or in the chat. Like, again, we're not looking for answers, but do you agree with what I said? Do we need something different as far as how we get the things that we want via collective action? What should that look like, or what should we do now in this day and age? I definitely think social media should be a part of it for sure, but not to what we have seen over the last decade, especially. Just getting people in the streets to rant and rave for a couple of hours and then go home. We can't afford to keep doing that if that's not working. So let us know in the chat what you think and what you believe might be the best things that we should be doing to move forward. You can scan the QR code that you see on your screen that Reef will go back to, or you can go to the Ko-fi link at the bottom of your screen if you want to donate to the network. If you're in the YouTube chat, you can type in !donate, all one word, and the Ko-fi link will pop up if you want to donate there as well. You can also go to our Substack, Cash App, and PayPal links in the description if you want to donate that way too. And like we always say, we understand that money is tight for a lot of you. So if you want to support us, don't forget to like and subscribe and share our content to help us fight this suppression on YouTube. And make sure you leave a comment based on what we've talked about in this segment once we clip it up. And thank you for watching.